So up next we have Susie who's joining us. So Susie cycles for transport. She cycled around Manchester, I hope she doesn't mind me saying, but for over 40 years. She took her child to school by bike, did lots of riding for leisure, and was the founder of Cycling for Softies, cycle touring company. And she's even written a book, so we have an author in our midst. So we're looking forward to hearing you. Welcome to Susie.
Thank you very much. I might say I was going to apologise because originally I was going to come in a car, but I've got a bicycle outside. Has anybody, I was also wondering if there's anybody here who was born in 79?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I started my cycling around Manchester in 1979. However many years that was ago. Yeah, there were a few of us, but there were very few people around who rode a bicycle at that time. And I bought a bicycle to take my daughter to school. And once you'd started going backwards and forwards with a child on the back of your bike, you thought, well, what else can I do with a bicycle? Actually, it was quite terrifying, because if I saw a car, I'd generally stop and wait for it to go past. But during the winter, we were thinking about summer holidays, and I said, well, my brother had once been to France on his bicycle with a friend, and I'd always thought going to France with a bicycle would be a nice idea. My husband obviously didn't think I really was going to do it, but eventually that's exactly what we did. We planned to go to from Newhaven to Dieppe, and so we set off that next summer with Claire on the back of my bicycle, age 5, and my husband carrying our luggage, that's the 3 people's luggage, in a pannier on his bicycle. All very different to what became later, that people needed to have their bags moved around, etc. We had an adventure holiday where we didn't know what was going to happen the next minute, let alone the next day. And we cycled, we arrived in Dieppe, and my husband, unbeknownst to me, had bought a day return because he didn't think I'd really want to do it. But the weather was so ghastly going across, and also I think we had 8 hours on this boat, jumping up and down in the awful weather, and we also had a port strike, so we couldn't land. Then the thought of going back on a boat after that was no way was I going to do it, so we set off. And we were heading for Cherbourg, along the coast, from Dieppe to Cherbourg, along Normandy coast, which is very pretty, very nice, empty. There were no other cyclists, but there were no other people either. And we'd stay in little hotels, and then next day would move on and only stop when we found another hotel. So one day it would be 15 miles, and another day it was 45 miles or whatever, but it was the way it went. And my husband with his clothes, well, there was a time, of course, when we got short of clothes, and 2 people had to stay in bed whilst the other person took everything to the laundrette and hoped it was dry before we had to set off again. But the super thing about staying in hotels, you could dry every evening, because although you got wet wandering about, you actually got dry when you got to your hotel. And we always chose a hotel with food. And the thing about France, of course, you eat very nicely. But if they've got a restaurant in the hotel, that was even better. I started... my husband was very keen at the time he was a research fellow at the business school in Manchester, and he was waiting for money to come through, and he was having some difficulty. He was not hearing that he had any funding at all. So as we cycled along, he spent a lot of time talking about what else we might do to earn our living. And this helped a bit later on when we got to the ferry coming home from Cherbourg. We got on the ferry and found that everybody had been camping in the rain. An extreme, a large quantity of young people who had been with their parents having miserable holidays, saw a bicycle and promptly said, why didn't we have a bicycle? Why didn't we go on a cycling holiday? And my husband suddenly said, hang on, we've got an idea, we can do cycling holidays. And of course, by the time we came home, all his funding had come round. So he said, well, you do it. I rather like, though, one of the stories as we were going along, trying to explain how there weren't any cyclists, because people did cycle on a Sunday. They went out for 80 kilometres in France with their pals and never saw a thing. They just put their heads down and cycled like mad. In England, you did time trials. I remember I had a friend who went off and did time trials on a Sunday again. I don't think nobody normal cycled, though. But when we got to France, I remember getting off one day and we were walking up a hill, and my daughter and my husband were walking beside me, and we saw somebody cutting grass on the side of a hill on a verge for his rabbits. And he said, "Where have you come from?" And I said, "Well, we've come from England." "That's a very long way." And I said, "Well, we did come on the boat to start with, and it's only been cycling from Dieppe." And then I said, "Well, when did you see the English on bikes last time?" And he had a bit of a think, and he said, 1945. So having decided we're going to make a holiday company, the first thought was where we were going to start and where was going to be the beginning of the holidays and what should we do. And we'd have to find a hotel. And did we have lots of hotels? Well, anyhow, we started very simple. We had one hotel, and to find that hotel, we thought again about somewhere easy to get to in France, and so it had to be somewhere relatively close to England, and we would think of places that other people would know. Well, England, well, what do the English know? Well, they know about Normandy, and they know about Brittany, and they know about the Loire Valley, so it better be somewhere there. So we got a pin and put it in the map. And the map, actually, the pin came out at a place called Laval. And Laval is a little town in Mayenne. And we then looked for hotels around Laval, and we found one in a place called Verges in Mayenne. It's part of the Loire Valley, and it turned out to be perfect. It was the last one we looked at of about 8. We'd gone over there for a weekend to check out hotels. And of course, what had happened was this hotel had decided we obviously were coming. So when we walked in, they said, "Oh, jolly good. When are you starting?" And so it wasn't a question of, are we chosen, but we're choosing you. So that was lovely. And then to begin with, you have to obviously advertise. You have to decide on what you can offer. And we decided we would offer what we had done, which was to get there. You would have a bicycle, you would have a map, and you would have a hotel at the beginning and the end of the holiday, so that was relatively secure, but the rest would be an adventure. And so in the first year we had 100 people, but just small numbers. The first time was 8 people who came, and I went to Paris to collect them because they were going to be at the Gare du Nord, and they all arrived in various ages and groups, most of which hadn't ridden a bicycle for yonks. They all said, "I haven't ridden a bicycle for 25 years. And of course, the French were absolutely mesmerized in this village by these people coming to ride a bicycle in France, not knowing where they were going, not knowing where they were staying, and more so, not knowing where they were going to have lunch. But anyhow, they all went off relatively happily, disappeared for a fortnight, and when they came back, there was a phone call from a neighbouring hotel saying, "I've seen them. They're on their way home." And they're just little groups of people, 2s and 3s. And they came in, and it was, mention of Tour de France, we had the Tour de France of 8 people. They arrived and the village had come out to see that they were really coming back, because they thought they would take the bicycle, get fed up and leave it somewhere and just go home. But they all managed to get back into Verges, and of course we were very pleased to see them too, but we were getting a bit nervous by that time. Were they ever going to be arriving back? And they did. And so we asked them what else they would like, and they said, "Well, next time I prefer to have a holiday where all the hotels were booked." So we started having something called the Gentle Tourer, and this worked out very easily because we had neighbouring hotels who all now heard about the cyclists coming in, and they were keen for them to be included. And the following year we had about 500 people, and it built up to 1,000 people very quickly, and with still very small numbers going through. And people kept saying, "Have you got room? Have you got room?" Well, we had the whole of France to go at, so there was always somebody there. And we always had somebody on the spot looking after them. We always had the base hotel where they spent 2 nights, and then they could choose rather. So some people said, well, I wanted to still do an adventure holiday, so they would go off. Somebody else said, I've got a lovely bicycle, I want to bring it. So they didn't use our bicycle. So we tried to be as flexible as possible. And then over the years, we added more regions, and I think we had 8 or 10 regions at all times for the next 20 odd years, and about, 300, 400 bicycles in various parts of France. And the people were lovely. They kept on coming back. We had people who came for 15 years on a trot. We had one family who came for 15 years, exactly the same hotels every year, which made life very easy. But one of the stories was that we had a family of teenagers, and I remember the parents saying to me, well, when they're coming for the last holiday as a family. And when 20 years later I said to them, how did you manage to persuade your children to come every year for 20 years? Because they were still coming back as a family. And he said, very easy, I paid. My husband went off and did his own thing, so I was the one who did the holidays. And to start with, it was in my house. I had the back room. Then we moved into a small office in town, and then we moved to a slightly bigger office in town. Then we seemed to get more and more staff. Then we moved to Birch Polygon in Rusholme, and we were there for 20 years. And then eventually we moved around the corner again, got small again, and sold on the company. But the interesting thing about when you have a company is that you think you might sell it at some point. And in fact, if you've got an accountant, they think you're going to sell it in the first 2 or 3 years. Oh, you've thought of a brilliant idea, now you can sell it. Well, of course, I said, but what will I do for the rest of my life? And anyhow, I managed to say that, no, we would carry on doing things. We'd do it the way we wanted to do it. And to start with, it was called Susi Madron Cycling Holidays, and the company was called that. And then we had a lovely time marketing it and doing it all sorts of, how can you persuade people to come on your holidays? And one day we had an advert in the Sunday Times which said, cycling for softies, because my husband was saying, people don't realise you can ride a bicycle and you could stay in a hotel. They still had to carry everything in their panniers, which of course was not cycling for softies for some people, but for us that was the way we were doing it. And the Cycling for Softies name just took off, so we then used that as a major advertising ploy. But it was a very nice, enjoyable thing to do, because who else has a business where people smile all the time? They keep on coming back, and just as this lady was talking a moment ago, you really enjoy doing it, and you love it. And because you make a lot of friends, just because people keep on saying to you, oh, I'll see you again next year, or have you got a new region, or can I do, I've had a thought about so-and-so, I'm bringing my friend this year, or my husband died last year, but don't worry, somebody is coming with me anyhow. And it just continued. And this it's a very nice way of, having a very pleasant life when you spend your time going on a bicycle. At home, I've always had a bicycle, and tonight I've come on a bicycle. But I might say for many of you, I started long, long, long before your own life started as well.
Have we got any questions? Any questions for Susie? Yes, one at the back.
How have you seen Manchester change for for a while? Do you like some of the improvements? Do you think that they've changed a bit more?
Oh, the cycling improvement. Well, I think the cycling improvements are phenomenal, absolutely great. But we already had a discussion this evening about how cycling along Wilmslow Road, despite the cycle lane, is not very easy. But I'm one of these people who likes to go cycling along the little back roads, so I know the alternative ones. I mean, I go into town, not down the main road, but down through Hathersage Road, and then past ending up in Umist all the way around the corner there. There's the old route back. But the other day I went to Stretford, And you can get out a cycling map, and I think the cycle maps are fabulous, and you end up taking, again, paths through Chalternese or Sail Park, Water Park or whatever. And I think those are very enjoyable indeed. Yes, I think the improvements are always there. Keep on telling Andy Burnham we need more. But in Russia, we've been quite lucky. I don't think this is very safe down here at all. But the cycle path is another great thing. Yeah, I find that lots and lots of places which are very nice. And all my family cycle, and they live, my daughter and her husband and children live in Didsbury, and they come in and out to the university on a regular basis. I don't know if it's down the main road. I haven't asked, actually. But it's certainly, they can use it a lot now, and you can feel pretty safe. And loads of people, have you noticed, as you're going to the university, there's a little meter which tells you how many people have been past. And in the summer parts, and nobody was around, it was 500. Now it's up to 2,000 plus. And I look at that every time, and I think, oh, jolly good.
We're gonna take that little clip of you and send it to Andy Burnham.
Good.
Any more questions? Yes, one over here.
I thought your talk was amazing. It was really, really good. My question is from when you started cycling around Manchester in comparison to now, did you feel like the only woman riding a bike at that time? Has it massively increased, or has it just felt the same?
Oh, no. Well, then I think I'm the only person, except with Jill, of a similar age, who's my colleague I've come with today and a neighbour. But we don't have many people older riding, despite everything. Lots of young people, though, which is just fabulous. I wish they wouldn't always go on the road instead of on the cycle path. I do find some people risk them, make risks. I think loads more now. I think you see everybody cycling now. I think that's really, really nice. Yeah, and I think it's so much healthier. And I also think it means you don't take your car out, even if you've got one.
Thank you.
Susie,
Vincent's also another old person. Oh, and Anne.
must thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm not the only bloke. Yes, Susie, we're neighbours. The company, does it still retain your name? Does it still exist?
Yes, there's a company called Cycling for Softies, which is out there somewhere. It's part of a group, a large organisation that bought my company. It was a skiing company, wanted something for the summer, which I didn't tell them that I actually used to do most of the work in the winter when you're taking the bookings, but never mind. I can give you another talk about selling companies one day.
Right, one final question over here.
I guess it's not really a question because I kind of know the answer, but like when you started that company, I guess you were all on paper maps.
Absolutely.
Were readily available for that part of France and the parts of France that you were looking at, or was that quite a challenge initially?
No, France is very well provided with paper maps. They're absolutely brilliant. And they've got many, many more small roads which are unused by heavy traffic. So that's a great advantage. We did go on to GPS for those who wanted it in the last few years of running my company. The funniest things was that about 2 p.m, as they just finished their lunch, they'd stopped at, they'd set off in the morning at 10 o'clock. They had their GPS sitting in front of them. They knew exactly where they were, or the Google Maps or whatever they called it. There you are, you see, I'm so naive. And then they would have lunch somewhere, and they didn't turn anything off. So by the time they got on the bike again, it was flat. And so they had to find somebody who can then telephone us to say, how do I now go from A to B? Because I haven't yet arrived at where I have to go. So I said, look at your map.
Thank you so much, Susie. That was amazing. I think everyone will be off cycling around France or Manchester, whichever after that. Thank you for inspiring us.